Welcome to your iconic image. If you want to take control of your image and be a power player in your space, then this is the show for you. Here we will arm you with tools and information to help you grow your brand on purpose. I'm your host, Marlana Semenza, photographer and visual strategist. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today's guest is truly incredible. Dr. Hoby Wedler loves to bring people together to help them see new possibilities. With the heart of a teacher, he helps turn your dreams into realities. Completely blind since birth, he is a scientist, an entrepreneur, and a sensory expert. He's dedicated to impacting everyone he works with by unlocking doors, overcoming challenges, increasing awareness, and expanding their horizons. Welcome, Hoby.
Marlana, thank you so much for this honor. I really appreciate it. It's an exciting opportunity to chat with you. You know, when we talked a few weeks ago, I think we have so much in common, and we're both artists at heart, and there's just so much to talk about.
Well, I have to tell everybody listening that I have made my life as a photographer. So I've made it through what I see. But you have taught me how to see differently, because I think so many of us rely on simply what we see, and we judge by what we see, we assess by what we see, and we forget that we have other senses. And when I watch the way you create experiences, whether it be for yourself or for others, you make them so full and rounded. So how do you go about that?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that for someone who's actually lacked one sense, which is the sense of eyesight, for my whole life, I really do have a different approach to how I take life and how I live life, and it's about embracing the non-visual senses that we have, but creating opportunities out of those senses that create that same joy and pleasure and evoke, happiness, basically. Because it's not about, for me, life isn't about, oh, woe is me, I can't see, I can't take stuff in, I need all this help, my job is harder because I'm blind. It's like, no, how am I going to figure out how to be the best possible blind person I can be? And, experience life through the non-visual senses, really stopping and listening to birds that are chirping outside, or smelling the air, and just being happy that I'm alive and that I'm in this air, in this area where I am. And it really is, eyesight allows us to really move so quickly through the world. And I feel stressed out just like anyone else. And sometimes I feel like I don't have enough time, and I feel busy, and certain situations happen where I'm just totally, running through the world and trying to get things done. But I think that ultimately being blind lets me slow down a little more than other people sometimes get the opportunity to, and observe things that maybe people don't necessarily get to observe on a day-to-day basis. And that's how I sort of view the world, with view experiences that I create. So one of my favorite things to do is to not use a blindfold or game or anything like that, but bring people together and let them really wear a blindfold and engage in something that I created with Francis Ford Coppola, who's a movie director, back in 2011, called Tasting in the Dark. I developed it with him for wine, but I've since expanded it to many different industries and many different markets around the world. And what would I say about that? It really, when we temporarily remove eyesight, we are really able to focus in on our other senses so much more. And when we use our vision, our eyesight, to obtain 85 to 90% of the information we take in from our surroundings, when we take it away, it's not about, oh, what does this taste like? I mean, it kind of is. We have fun with that, right? But it starts so much earlier than that. It's, okay, what does this chair feel like beneath me? What are we talking about? When we're not distracted by our eyesight, what other information can we take in that we didn't even think was possible?
Mm.
And that's really exciting. And that's my way of generating experiences for everybody to sort of understand and go about. And I didn't realize I was doing this, but since I was a child, I've really been developing my palate, my ability to observe different flavors and aromas and textures. And articulate them and understand what they are. So basically really have a library of flavors and aromas in my mind that are individual. And then when something's a blend of many different flavors, I can really break it down and pull out the components that that really contribute, the individual components, and I'm able to talk about those and talk through them to the best of my ability. So that's a lot of fun.
So, and there are two things, but one I'll ask you now, and then the other one we'll get to. So tell us a little bit more about tasting in the dark, and also too, tell us about, because I had heard about the experience of Dave Matthews. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so tasting in the dark is really just an experience where people get to engage and understand their non-visual senses for a while, for anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour, or sometimes even longer than that, depending, and really delve into what something is, what happens when we remove our eyesight. Well, really, what ends up happening is that we're able to home in on our other senses so much more than we would be otherwise, and we can talk about flavor. People pick up on flavors that they never would have gained. And we don't necessarily tell them what the wine or food or drink of any type that they're tasting is. We literally just we let them taste it and explore it on their own. And we use aromatics, basically samples that I develop ahead of time, to help people really develop their aromatic vocabulary. So I will understand wines that we're tasting and working with ahead of time. And then people will be able to smell and understand what lemon by itself smells like. What does vanilla smell like by itself? Things that I pull out of the wines, maybe 3 to 5 different aromas that I'll make individual samples of, so people can smell these. And what I like to say is sort of calibrate or exercise their aromatic vocabulary. So here are a few things that we're smelling by themselves. And the task is going to be, can we pull these out of the wines when we smell them and taste them? And then we smell that food or beverage. In this case, I'll just use wine as my example, for a while and really talk about everything we smell. And then finally we taste it and we talk about everything we taste and just analyze it together as a group. And people that think, oh, I'm not that good with my sensory, describing things, find it, usually for me anyway, when they put a blindfold on, they're very capable and they become so strong at understanding different aromas, different things that they maybe wouldn't be able to pick up on because they would be distracted by their eyesight. Mm-hmm. And when we don't tell people what a wine is, again, just using wine as an example here, sometimes people will come to me and say, oh, I don't like Chardonnay. And then they'll do this experience and say, oh my gosh, this wine is delicious. Oh, I would love this. I would totally buy this. What is this wine? Well, you'd be surprised to know that it's Chardonnay. And we show people that maybe sometimes their preconceived notion of what they like is only based on, oh, I see the bottle, I see the Chardonnay, I'm going to immediately decide that I don't like Chardonnay for whatever reason. Maybe we don't need to put up these walls and these barriers around what we do. Mm. And that's really exciting, to just sort of open people's minds and change what certain beverages mean to them.
And I know that you added in the element of music at one point with
We've done Dave this Matthews a few times. So I will talk about the Dave Matthews experience for sure. The Culinary Institute of America, are sometimes known as the CIA, is a big cooking school. And I work as an adjunct faculty for their properties here in California. And people have learned over the years that whenever they want something really strange, they call Hoby. So I'm good at figuring out weird things to do that hopefully are fun for people. So in this case, they basically were doing a summit for beverage professionals, and most of the people who attend this are sommeliers, people who really understand wine, or even masters of wine, and some beer people, some spirits people for sure, but definitely a lot of wine people. And they wanted to do a disco at the end of the first day of the conference, basically a silent music disco where people wear headphones and go around listening to music and tasting wines, and they rank their favorite wine based on music that's playing in their ears, right? They listen to different music and they rank wines differently. And they said, we want something to do with wine and music the hour before we do this disco. And I said, that's interesting. Who's someone who does wine and music really well? Well, Dave Matthews has a winery, Dreaming Tree Wines, and they're very good wines, very much available pretty much nationwide. So I thought, most people are going to know what this is, and let's see if we can't do an experience around it. And I'm always the person who says, well, what's the worst they can do? They can say no. So I decided I would just take a shot in the dark and email Dave's winemaker, a man named Sean McKenzie, saying, Sean, I do this tasting in the dark program. I've been asked to do an experience around wine and music. I would love to do an experience where we take wines from the Dave Matthews or from Dreaming Tree, from the Dreaming Tree portfolio, and pair them with songs from the Dave Matthews Songbook. Is this something you'd be amenable to? And I expected, I don't know, I didn't know if I would hear back from him. I just didn't know. 30 minutes later, I got an email back saying, Hoby, yes, absolutely. Let's have a call. So we had a call, and it's like, okay, wow. And then he said, okay, well, why don't you come to the winery and we'll taste the wines. We'll decide what we're working with here. And in the meantime, I'll talk to Dave about songs. So Dave weighed in on songs. It was ultimately our decision, but Dave weighed in on what he thought would be best. And lo and behold, we built out this whole experience where we talked about wine and music with people. It was about 200 people in the audience. And then while people were under blindfold, for some of them, the last one, we actually had them remove the blindfold and just move to the music and the music video that we showed. But we paired 5 pours of wine with 5 different songs from the Dave Matthews Songbook. And the sort of climax, if you will, of the experience was wines 3 and 4, where for wine 3, we served a wine with, with a piece of music that was sort of very, very happy, very, kind of a romantic piece of music, kind of a little bit of a love song, kind of, it was just fun. People tasted the wine and said, oh yeah, at the end we talked about what the wine tastes like. It was very citrusy, very fruit forward, a lot of floral components, smells like something I'd want to drink in the summertime. And then we played with wine. Sorry, I think that was wine. I said wine 4, but I think that was wine 3. With the next wine, we played to accompany it, sort of a more sort of gritty song that was just more, work hard and you'll get what you wish for, and keep on trying, keep on pushing, but not that same sort of happy-go-lucky sort of tune. And I wouldn't describe any like Dave's music as happy-go-lucky, but I'm trying to figure out the right words here to describe the music. And people tasted the wine and talked about its minerals, how they could smell some fruit, but it's very you could smell the granite in it. You can smell the basically wet earth. Wow, this is just full of minerals, almost like you might hear describing a wine from like a rosé from Provence, France. Really just very minerally, very very rich, very full of flavor. And from basically anywhere in the south of France. I didn't mean to call out Provence as a region in and of itself, but anywhere sort of in the south of France, you might find really minerally either red wines or rosés. People did identify the third wine as a rosé. They said for the fourth wine, man, this might be a red blend. But it's got so much minerality. It might also be an old world white wine. They just didn't know. And what we didn't tell people is that the fourth wine was exactly the same as the third wine. It was just the same Dreaming Tree rosé. The only thing that was different, and they couldn't see it, right? That helped too. Mm-hmm. Literally the only variable that was different was the music they listened to. And I was doing this to show people how much music can impact, anything for that matter, can totally impact the experience, the overall experience of wine.
Love that.
It was fun.
And it's so incredible to me that people thought it was a completely different thing just because of adding that musical
different
element.
Music. Yeah. And it's amazing. I guess for just thinking about your work as a photographer, you can make something look totally different, even if it's the same exact set or same exact thing you're photographing, using different light, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Or even just by
similar.
the way you edit something, or yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
love
all
that.
it kind of boils down to what we want people to see and experience.
Hmm.
And so with what you do and even with what I do, we
It's the
are
same thing.
leading them on a journey,
Yes,
and we already have their destination hopefully in mind.
exactly. And
So,
this is what art is to me. You know, everybody says, oh, art is visual. Well, it certainly can be. And you're a great producer of visual art, but art doesn't have to be visual. You know,
mm,
exactly what you say, we lead people on a journey, we guide them through, and we help them see things they didn't see before.
absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit about, because I follow your Instagram and these places that you go to and you experience.
Yeah.
You make people feel like they are there and immersed with you. So when you embark on an experience of your own,
Yeah.
how do you approach something? Let's say you go to um, the Swiss Alps for the first time. How do you
Yeah.
start?
Yeah. You know, it's funny. The way that I start is I don't even think about it. I just describe to anyone who wants to hear how I'm experiencing it.
Mm,
And it kind of grabs them usually and pulls them into it, because the way that I experience things and describe them is not visual. You know, with
right.
someone, what I've found with people who are very sort of focused on what they see, it's hard for them to describe something and make it almost feel like you're there,
Hmm.
because they're really paying attention to the visual, which they can then explain, and that which works fine, but it's talking about maybe green hills rather than, whoa, what do we smell? What's the overall experience around us like? What are we gaining from this environment, this experience, where we are right now? How are we? It's a really interesting question, and I haven't thought about the answer to what you're asking. Where do I start? But and when I think about it, I say that I don't think about it at all, but I guess I do try to think about things before I talk about them, and explain them, sort of what I'm experiencing. And I guess what I like to do is I like to think, if someone were describing this to me, what would they say to make me feel like I was there?
Mm,
So I describe the smells, I describe the way the air feels, I describe the way the ground feels, and just something about the experience and the people and the everything going on in a place, in an opportunity that I would want to hear about, to feel like I was there. So one of the videos that you saw that I was most proud of was a video in the Italian Alps, because we were there actually working anyway, of cows moving through a pasture, and their bells ringing as they move. That's an audio picture that we were able to capture, and along with the description of the smell of the grass and the manure and all these different things, it really created the ability to tell a good story and have sort of a multi-sensory approach, that's really enjoyable. What I didn't tell viewers is that about 3 minutes after we shot that video, the cows got scared. Someone else was doing some other filming and had a drone out,
oh,
and the drone spooked the cows, and we were still in the pasture with them, and one like charged after us. So we had to run our way out of there and get
oh
through a
my.
small gate. That was a fun experience, but we didn't show that or tell viewers that. It was the sort of thing where had a camera been on, it would have been one of these things that like goes viral on TikTok. But of course, we didn't film that moment.
I'm almost sad that you didn't.
I know, we just weren't prepared, and when you're being charged by a large animal, you don't have time to turn on the camera.
But you actually bring up an interesting point, because you just described a whole experience. And even though you don't have the luxury of taking photos that will bring these memories back to you,
Yeah,
these experiences stayed with you. And I think so many people, when they go someplace, they are so consumed with documenting their life and what's going on that they don't
visually
experience,
documenting.
yes, they don't experience it for the experience.
This
And
is a
that
really
stays.
interesting point that you bring up. So, and it's one that I really want to touch on. I feel like eyesight is a very good general sense. So I think that the way that we use our senses in order of how vulnerable they are. So eyesight is not vulnerable. I mean, you can look up and see the moon at night. You can look
Mhm.
up and see stars that are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of light years away. You can drive with your windows open and just use your eyes to do it. So you can be in the privacy of your own car and operate it without issue using your own two eyes. Hearing, I think, is the next least vulnerable sense. You can hear a loud noise from far away. You don't really have to make something part of you in order to hear it. Touch is pretty vulnerable. If I'm going to touch my desktop, like I just did, I have to be close enough to it, so I better trust it. You know, and if I'm going to smell or taste something, those are the most vulnerable two senses because we're right near it, and we have to actually make it a part of us, whether we're
Mm.
breathing in or actually tasting it. We have to trust the source. Basically, is what I'm saying. Um, and interestingly, when we think about um, photography, we're using our eyesight, but when we use our sense of smell, that's actually a much more primitive sense that gives us a lot more information. If you look at a picture of your grandmother's kitchen, you might say, "Oh, that was grandma's kitchen. That was great." But like, let's say your grandma used to cook gingerbread cookies. I don't know if she did. That's just an analogy. And the next time you smell gingerbread cookies baking, it's almost like you're in grandma's kitchen,
Mhm.
right? So when we look at something, our brains are actually doing a lot of work. First of all, that image is coming into our mind inverted of what our brain actually sees. And literally, when we look at something, we're converting a molecule of trans retinal, which is a lower energy structure, to cis retinal. And that's all we're doing. That's all that's happening chemically when our eye looks at something, right? And our brain knows exactly how much was converted and how long it took, and does all the rest of giving us the image. So you might not think about it, but it takes 5 to 50 milliseconds, I've heard, from when you see something on the lens of your eye to the time that your brain recognizes what you're seeing. So, and that doesn't sound like a long time, but it actually is kind of a long time, and a lot of subconscious brain processing that needs to take place as that happens. And there are about, I think it's 500 or 600 million neuron bridges between your optic nerve and your cerebral cortex, where visual images are really perceived. Now, when we smell something, our olfactory bulb is where we're doing the smelling, just over the bridge of our nose. And it's about 8,000 little nerve endings, which look like hairs around a sphere. And when we smell, those, things get stuck to those nerve endings and tell our brains immediately what we're smelling. So, and there's only about 50 million neurons, I've heard, between our olfactory bulb and our cerebral cortex. So it's a much shorter journey. And smell is just sort of a more primitive, but more emotion evoking sense.
Mm.
So like, you might, documenting a wedding, for instance, visually is great because it's lighthearted. It's like, oh yeah, we were with those folks. It was a great time, and you can kind of remember that day, right? And if the photo's date stamped, but if it's really important to you, like if it's your own wedding and you remember what type of champagne you were drinking at that wedding, you were serving at your wedding, you can open a bottle of that champagne 5 or 10 years later and have it almost feel like you're there again when you smell it.
Mm. And I think that's what I am hoping that people get out of this is to try and immerse themselves in the experience of their life.
Mm,
And yes, I'm all about photos. You want to take a photo to recall something or whatever. Yes,
absolutely.
but
Do it.
but you will enrich your experience and it will stay with you a lot longer if you embrace all of the aspects of it.
And the other thing that I would say that I think is just so important to point out is that, um, we have all of our senses are always available to us. So use them to enrich your life as much as possible. Pay attention to the way things smell when they're cooking, to the smell of the changing seasons outside. Now we're in winter, but wait a few short months and we'll be in spring, and you'll be able to smell different things, grass being cut, flowers blooming. Just experience life through your non-visual senses. I was born without eyesight, so people would think, oh man, his life must not be very rich because he can't see like us. But the life without eyesight is actually all that I know.
Mm.
I don't know what life is like without vision, without eyesight. So that's that's how I live. That's what I do,
Mm.
and I think there's so much richness that people are missing out on without using all their senses. I will point something out to you that's really interesting because I think your listeners will find it interesting. About a week ago, I came down with COVID, and one of the things that and I'm fully vaccinated and boosted and everything. I got a breakthrough case, which seemed to be very popular these days. Um, one of the things that's been happening to some people, not all, but some, is that their taste and smell are going. And I
Mm.
actually experienced this. And my sense of smell is just barely coming back, but it's all weird. And I have to kind of retrain my brain. And when you're someone who relies on those two senses so much for your survival and for your work and for what you do, to lose them even temporarily is really jarring.
I'm sure.
Yeah, and it's something interesting. And I think a lot of people don't realize or didn't realize how important and strong and necessary their sense of smell was until it went away.
Hmm.
And I've heard stories and read articles about this. I just find it fascinating how much we maybe use our other senses but don't necessarily think about it. And that's my career, and that's the work that I do is in sensory design, basically designing products in the food and beverage industry mostly, but also outside the food and beverage industry that appeal to our senses more than eyesight. I call
So,
that sensory design. And what I like to say is all of our senses are always on and
mm,
delivering information. We just might not be paying attention to it, but they will let us know. I guarantee if we don't like something, our senses will tell us, hey, that's something you don't like.
mm,
Even really silly subconscious things like the way your cell phone feels when you hold it up against your ear, to the way your shower curtain smells when you open the package, to all these things that we don't necessarily think about, but they actually matter. And
yeah.
these are the things that I think about. So I like to say to people who I work with that my clients are folks that are really good at what they do, but they need help looking beyond eyesight.
Mm. And now that you brought up that you make products and experiences in the food and beverage industry, please tell everybody about Hoby's Essentials. What's that?
Yeah, yeah. Hoby's Essentials is a lot of fun. It's a line of spices and gourmet seasonings that we have. Currently have two products, which are two that I are my standbys that I've been making for years and years and years in my own kitchen, and thought, why don't we just get these out to the world? One is a happy paprika, which is paprika and a little bit of salt, mostly paprika, cumin, onion, garlic, a little bit of coconut sugar, just a great grill and roasted meats and vegetables rub. The other is rosemary salt blend, which is a literally salt that's been flavored with rosemary and sage and garlic. And the kind of secret ingredient there is lemon juice to really bring out the flavor. And it's just incredible on poultry, potatoes, you name it, in anything. It's really quite fun, and I'm very excited about those.
And so now that you've told everybody what's in them, the challenge is when they buy these products to see if they can actually pick out the flavor of each thing.
That's it. That's it. Absolutely. And I'm also working on a vodka project right now. I'm going to be launching a vodka line in the next 6 months or so, and eventually a wine brand. So I like to tell people honestly exactly what's in things, and just produce products with great quality. I've
Mm.
also done some work in the tech space, thinking about glass texture as it appears on our trackpads of our computers or on our smartphones. Actually, a few years back, helped a company decide on what glass they would use based on texture for their next generation of smartphones. So
Wow. So interesting.
all these things matter. How does
Absolutely.
how does the glass feel under your finger on something that you're interacting with maybe more hours a day than we all care to admit? You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Love it. Thank you. I have loved every minute of this conversation, Hobie. And
So did I, Marlana. Thank you.
but with that, I just have four final questions for you, and then
Yes,
we'll
I
wrap
love
it
it.
up. The first one is, what's the best piece of advice you were ever given?
The best piece of advice I was ever given was from my parents, and it was, this is your life to live, so you need to take responsibility for yourself and your actions. Meaning that if we succeed at something, if we take a challenge and we succeed, we are the ones who should get the credit, right? But if we take a challenge and we fail, I don't like the word fail, but if we don't succeed, we should take the blame for it. But everything we do, we should own from the bottom of our heart. And that is a really important, very significant piece of advice that I think everybody should embrace, because when we take responsibility for everything, we can't blame other people for anything that's happening to us. And it makes it more fun when we succeed.
Share with us one thing on your bucket list.
One thing on my bucket list, I've been thinking a lot about this one. I have dreamed a lot of putting together a TV show or something just about experiences in the food and beverage industry. And that is a bucket list item for me. I need to
do it, Hoby. Do it. I will watch it.
Thank you. I need to do that with my time here on this planet, and that will happen. So that is my biggest bucket list item. And I want to get to that sooner rather than later, because it thrills me to think about, my passion here, and I'm sorry to, go on and on about this a little bit, but my passion isn't having me talk about stuff around me as much as it is getting other people who love what they do to talk about what it is that they do and why they love it. And almost in a way, remind them of why they got into this career that they're in and why they love what they do. And I think so many people in the food and beverage industry got into it because of a love of food or drink or, whatever. They had to have some passion for it, but maybe they're stuck with the grind of life and their business, and maybe they forget about that. So my goal with any conversation I have with someone in the industry is just to rekindle that passion for whatever they do.
Love it. Okay, when the toy companies finally get around to making an action figure of you, what 2 accessories will it come with?
What 2 accessories will it come with? Man, for me, it's a great question. An action figure of me would come with a cane, something to use to navigate the world, a white cane. And the other one I think would be I'm trying to think of what this would be, but like a way to, a way to experience. How do I say this? The cane is an essential, but the other one would be really something that we can use to overall experience the world and get richer experiences out of whatever it is we're doing. So I don't know, maybe a thinking cap, something like that, a way to ponder the world.
Love it. And the last one, Hoby, if anybody wants to find you, follow you, or even buy Hoby's Essentials, how do they find you?
Absolutely. If you go over to hoby.com, hoby.com, there are links to hobysessentials.com, as well as my personal website, which is hobywedler.com. And I'm at Hoby Wedler on all the social media platforms, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook. You can find me easily as well. And just email me anytime, hoby@hobywedler.com, HOBY@HOBYWEDLER.com.
Love it. Thank you so much for being here, Hoby.
Marlana, it's an honor. Thank you for inviting me. I love your show. I love the spirit of your show. And I love what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for joining us. Once again, I'm Marlana Semenza, photographer and visual strategist. Please comment, like, or share this episode, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. For more information on how I can help you create your iconic image, visit marlanasemenza.com.